Okay, carrying on with our series on OOP concepts and terminology for VB, it's worth taking a revisit to the concepts of scope, lifetime, and we'll also look at accessibility. In good object-oriented design, we want to hide the data, so we'll only allow access to those attributes that we define in a class through methods or property procedures of that same class. And then, of course, those properties within the class we will allow to be visible at a higher level, so outside of the class. First, let's take a look at scope, where you can see or what has access to the variable, the attribute, or the method or the property procedure. Namespace, module, procedure, and block level. So those are in order of wide scope to narrow scope. Microsoft has basically dropped all reference to something we quite often call global variables. And then, of course, module, that individual code module that you're writing. So anything you declare sort of at the top of that module, everything within the scope of the module has access to it. And then, of course, as we go narrower through procedure and block levels, we actually narrow the scope or narrow the view, accessibility of those variables, methods, procedures. Lifetime, for the most part, is tied to the scope of the variable. Lifetime depends on the scope or the level of scope, with the exception of static. So you can declare something as static where this local variable inside of a block, it continues to exist. Those variables, constants, whatever it might be, declared as static, continue to retain their values after termination of the procedure of the block that they were actually declared in, which can be useful. You can ultimately declare anything in terms of entities that you might define in your application using a variety or any one of the variety of keywords listed here. So public, of course, which it's almost got a negative connotation to it. Public, it's accessible from anywhere. You know, any program that references this assembly can actually get access to public, and I would highly recommend that you steer clear of public declarations. Private, of course, getting from one extreme to the other. Private declares that variable or method, whatever it happens to be accessible only from within the class or the module. Protected is kind of cool, and we'll certainly get into protected when we start working with inheritance, because protected is like private, although it also allows classes that inherit from the class where the protected variable is declared to gain access to it. Friend is probably about as wide an accessibility as you want to look at, really anywhere inside the assembly, but assemblies outside of your application cannot access it. So in other words, you declare something as friend, everything within your application, your defined application, can access it. And then there's the combination protected friend. So anywhere in the project, any class that inherits from the class, even if that derived class, that class that inherits from the class where this is declared, is in a different program or assembly, which is kind of interesting. So there you have it. There's a bit of a review of scope, lifetime, and accessibility domains. And in the next video, we'll actually take an example of writing a class, and we'll start looking at creating objects